Hey, it's Men's here. I'm going to be doing a review of the new Tier 8 American Premium Tank Destroyer, the TS5, which there's also a marathon for this tank starting very shortly here. So if you haven't seen that already, it works like previous marathons where you can unlock tanks, or basically, in this case, the TS5, for discounts by completing missions, or you can just buy the tank in general, full price. In any event, though, that starts soon. Different video if you want to take a look at that. I'm sure other people have them. Or just go to worldoftanks.com.eu or in your client to see the marathon. This specific video is TS5. What is it? Is it good? Is it bad? Should I get it? Should I do the marathon? Blah, blah, blah. Basically, what you got here is a premium version of the T28. However, do note there are two loaders on this, unlike the T28 where there is not. So it's actually a pretty decent crew trainer in a sense, where you'll be able to train all but the T30's radio operator. It works with the T110E3, works with the E4. It pretty much works with every single crew that you can throw at it for the Americans in TDs. Will it match all of them 100%? No, but it does fit the crews outside of the radio man on the T30, because that, everyone knows that should be a heavy tank. In any sense, though, TS5. Before I get into a complete comparison, I'm going to focus on the armor first here. One thing about this tank, so looking at the armor here, just generally speaking, the cupola on this isn't too bad. Like, you're going to get penned if people hit it right in the center, albeit the weakest area is right towards the top of the cupola, right dead center. 186 millimeters effective, just about, and towards the sides, it gets stronger, and on the bottom area, it's a little bit stronger too. Now, getting around like the front of the superstructure, it's pretty darn strong outside of, you can get penned here by like premium rounds, and like, tier 9s and 10s like have a chance to go through, but typically it's pretty darn good. Mantlet is nothing, this kind of scoff at too. It's pretty darn good as well. It's actually better than the T28s. So good armor so far. However, one thing to note is, unlike the T28, it gets a lot weaker towards the bottom here. That's where most people are going to shoot you. As you can see, you start right beneath like the gun mantlet, and it kind of drops down towards the bottom. Albeit it's still kind of strong against lower tiers. And at the very bottom here, it is angled a lot. So unless you're shooting up at it, it is really hard to hit this very small piece at the bottom. But generally speaking, this is going to be your weak spot, albeit against like tier 6s, tier 7s, unless they're spamming gold at you. It's pretty hard to pen this, but nothing different than the T28, where its armor is still pretty good frontally. But main weak spot is bottom of this tank compared to the T28, where it's higher up. The sides obviously are decent when you consider like you're going to be angling and stuff, but if people flank you, you're going to get penned. So taking a quick look at the T28 here, looking at this, which I'm going to do a quick comparison, and we're going to get into an ace tanker game here. The T28 is glancing over this armor wise. You'll notice the cupolas are a little bit weaker, and there's two of them, albeit the one on the right's larger. Above the gun's a little bit weaker. Generally speaking, the front is a lot easier to pen, and it's flat. And the lower plate's a little bit stronger here. Not by like leaps and bounds, but it's smaller and stronger. So more or less the T28's armor, a little bit worse higher up and on the front. However, stronger lower plate. So make it as you will. Basically, I consider it kind of a wash in a way. Because both of these tanks don't have the best gun depression, so hiding this bottom part's a little bit more difficult. But the TS5 will bounce things with higher penetration off of this area better than the T28. Getting to the comparison here. Again, we're going to do a quick little breakdown just against the T28, and then followed up by an ace match here. More generally speaking, like, you can see that the guns are similar here, where the main difference between the two, damage and penetration, is the TS5 has a heat shell, 300 millimeters of pen, whereas the T28 has an APCR shell at 297 millimeters of penetration. So I would consider the T28 to have the better premium shell, just because I find APCR better to use than heat. Outside of some minor like gun traverse differences, gun depression the same, both don't have it. Gun traverse is pretty limited, nothing really to see there, they're kind of a wash. Aiming time's better on the TS5, however the accuracy is much worse, 0.06 difference. It's kind of really noticeable to where it's really hard to hit weaker areas, especially on armored tanks, and with that heat shell you're going to hit a lot more space armor that you don't want to hit if you're using that. So that is something to note. You do have a pretty considerable amount of DPM over the T28, but that accuracy is pretty noticeable, especially when you have that heat instead of the APCR shell. So it does limit you in penetrating some tougher targets, especially if you're like shooting like sides of like really heavily armored heavy tanks, whereas your basic 248 is pretty good for tier 8 obviously penetration. It is limiting you in some areas. So that is one big knock against the TS5 compared to the T28. Survivability, HP is the same. We went over the armor to where TS5's a little bit better like in the upper portion, whereas the T28's better on that lower plate. And then the cupolas, the TS5's a little bit better protected there, albeit, they're still not like the easiest things to hit all the time. Mobility, this is another difference between the two. Specific power, the T28 accelerates better and also moves around a little bit better, generally speaking, going from like a stop in the first like second or two. However, top speed is higher on the TS5, both forward and backwards. So after that first like second or two, or if you're like pivoting, the T28 beats it out, in that. But once you hit the top speed, the TS5 is faster, and both can get up to that top speed pretty easily since it's not very high. So it is a little bit more mobile, generally speaking, because the specific power isn't that far off. It's kind of splitting hairs, but it does have more specific power. Finally, the concealment, worse on the TS5 because it's a little bit larger than the T28, a little bit taller. So the T28 beats it out there. View range exactly the same. So let's get into a ace tanker battle here. I can say with 99% I guess truthfulness, I was the first one to ace this on the NA server because I played it immediately once we got it. But in any event though, I enjoyed the battle. My final thoughts will be right after the video here. Alright, so here we go. This is a replay, unlike my other reviews where I do it live. A little bit shorter on time here to do this today. So we got ourselves a Fisherman's Bay battle. This was literally the first battle, I believe, on the NA server for this tank. And a few people asked me like, what is this thing? But pretty much though, going into this, it plays very similar like the T28. So you want to use your frontal armor, and being top tier here, especially with the new matchmaking, you're going to see less tier 9s and less tier 10s. It's kind of nice to where this tank and other tanks like the T28 are going to be a little bit better to play since your armor works a little bit better. But generally speaking, no. This is kind of the best matchmaking I could have gotten for this. So one thing to note, you'll see I'm going towards the town. This, when you're top tier, you're going to be able to play, not to say exactly like a heavy tank, because you don't have a turret, obviously. However, you can play it pretty aggressively, much like the T28, albeit, you have to prevent yourself from getting flanked. That is very, very important. So, going to the town in this thing, you'll notice hitting the top speed. I max out around 26 kilometers, which is the top speed of this thing. You'll basically see in T28, the T28 would be lagging behind, where the top speed is pretty nice on this thing. If I did watch, or I didn't watch, I was live streaming this. Excuse me if I kind of bumble here, I'm trying to get this done on a short time frame. When I was live streaming this, I kind of noted like this thing feels pretty like quick compared to the T28, where I kind of forgot that the top speed was a little bit better. The top speed is nice. Like, generally speaking, even though it has a little bit less specific power, it's pretty darn good at a higher top speed. Which you'll notice this IS-6B penetrated me, and I'm kind of looking, I'm like, where the hell did he penetrate me? Like, the armor's like the T28, and that was a standard round. He penned me right on the bottom of that lower plate, like I was pointing out, whereas the standard T28, the IS-6 would have bounced off of that. Unless he shot a premium round, and even then, there's a chance he would bounce off the lower plate with a premium round. So, that lower plate is no joke. It is a weak spot. Once people learn that that's where they're going to shoot you, you need to be careful. I'm getting HE'd here against the KV-2, to where this does have a little bit better protection against HE shells than the T28 in a sense, because the cupolas are a little bit better. And just roughly, I feel like people don't know where to shoot this as much because it's all random on the front, like the T110E3, unlike the T28, which is flat on the front a little bit more so. In any event, though, I start kind of getting pissed off here against this KV-2, so we're gonna chuck some HE shells at him and get a little revenge. I think someone said counter derp on this stream live here. But so far, you'll notice, you rack up damage in this thing, because much like the T28 tank in the check tree, and even like the Proto and stuff like that, the gun at this tier, it just has DPM, has alpha, has penetration. You're not even going to struggle against tier 9s and 10s as much, albeit the gun specifically on the TS5, given the lower accuracy, you're gonna struggle on like super heavies, armor TDs, things you need to hit weak spots. So that is the main crippling factor of this tank, is when you're up against something that has really good armor, say like a Defender, and you're not able to, say, heat spam through his lower plate or get like a clean shot on him, it's going to be much harder to hit, like, say, a cupola on this tank than it is the standard T28. But getting up the top speed here again, it's definitely, it feels like just right, whereas the T28, you're capped lower, 22 kilometers an hour, I believe. That little bit of a difference, it feels awesome, honestly. Like, not to talk like too much about this tank and just say it's like great. I really like American TDs. Most of you guys who are probably watching that know that. Where this tank, albeit I think it's a really good premium, it definitely doesn't, say, power creep the T28, because, like, I didn't go over too much, I glanced over it. The T28 is going to be able to handle itself against higher tiers much better, given the accuracy, the APCR shell, whereas the TS5 is going to struggle a little bit more against those higher tiers. The new matchmaking, definitely helps the TS5 out a little bit better, generally speaking, but I do feel like they are balanced between the two of them, just because that .06 accuracy is definitely noticeable. Like, this is obviously an ace tanker match, it's, really good matchmaking, but the battle I played after this, I was having trouble specifically shooting some defenders, because accuracy was a little wonky, and even at the very end, I was shooting a T28 tank destroyer, and I was struggling to hit his cupolas at basically, say, like 200 meters, I think it was, or maybe a little bit less than that. So take everything with a grain of salt until you see like more people playing this, or people say on a stream, or if you get it yourself. But generally speaking, crew training is there. Credit earning potential is pretty decent, because you don't need too many premium rounds, and it's a fun tank to play if you like TDs like this. Just cleaning up here. I don't think I get any more damage, because you're still relatively slow, so getting up to them, but 3,600 damage, pretty darn good battle here, I would say. So yeah, I was really glad to get this in my first fight. I'm kind of happy about that. But in any event, we just kind of raffle stomp them. But hopefully you enjoyed this replay. We're about to kind of go over the end game screens here, and after we kind of flip through these real fast, obviously an ace tanker most amount of damage. A lot of people were saying it was kind of a freebie ace, but 1200 base experience just about. That's roughly in line with most ace tankers for a tier 8 tank, especially slower tanks. But let's get into kind of my final thoughts here, like whether or not, is it worth it or not. But by this point, there's nothing really to complain about this tank because, it's a T28 that has a little bit different stats and armor in different places. All right, hopefully you enjoyed that battle. Where the TS5, granted, I was a little lucky. I got an ace to where it's a little easier. I feel like the ace tanks sometimes right when they first come out because not everyone has played them and it's kind of a placeholder value. However, you can kind of say like this, it plays very, very similar to the T28. Where considering the accuracy differences and also considering that it also has the heat round and the speed, is better. It has it has pros and cons is basically what I'm trying to get at. Where is this better than the T28? No. Is it better in some ways? Yes. However, that accuracy is very noticeable, and also the armor scheme being different, combined with the gun depression, and it's a little hard to hide that sometimes, especially going over hills. It's easier to hit it. It's something that I think this is a pretty well balanced tank. People are going to like it. However, if you don't like tank destroyers and generally speaking like slower TDs that are a little wonky, you're not really going to like this thing. But it's definitely a good tank. It's a good crew trainer. Credit earning potential obviously is going to be better than the T28 in the tech tree. But generally speaking, balance wise, I feel like they're similar enough to where you can't really knock Wargaming for saying like this is overpowered, it power creeps a T28. Like, what are they doing? It's a good tank. It's got the damage potential. It's also got some more usable armor if you can get it in decent spots to hide that lower plate. But generally speaking, it's a pretty fun tank to play if you like American TDs, like the T28, like the T95, T110E3 and stuff. It's going to be a fun tank. The Marathon obviously is a little hard to do. That's how they're designed. Like, they're designed to where most people can get it like half off, maybe 60% off. To where is it worth like killing yourself over doing the Marathon? I'd say no, but that's up for you to decide. Overall though, my opinion on this is it's a nice addition to where I wish more premium tanks were like this, to where even if they're very similar to a tech tree tank, basically they have like a little leg up over it in an area and then a pretty equally disadvantage in another area. And as I kind of said quite a few times, accuracy is the issue on this tank and that lower plate. However, it does have a little bit more DPM, a little bit different armor scheme, and that mobility to compensate, but both go kind of hand in hand. If you like one, you're going to like the other, without one kind of overshadowing the other one. So in any event, hopefully you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching. If you're going to do the Marathon, good luck with it. Otherwise, this tank, it's a solid tank to where it's not for everybody, obviously, since it's a TD and it's slower, but it's definitely balance-wise a pretty good tank to add to your garage. But thanks again for watching. See you guys. Have a nice one.